Everyone's been watching this Bugatti Chiron rebuild like it's a story about fixing a broken car. And for a long time, that's exactly what it was. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Because the closer this Chiron gets to completion, the less this feels like a repair story and the more it starts to feel like something that was never supposed to happen, happening anyway. This isn't about what's already been done at this point. Most people following the build already know that. This is about what it means now. What it represents as it crosses into its final stages. And more importantly, what the people who said this couldn't be done outside a factory are thinking as they watch it approach completion in full public view. Because if you've been following this project from anywhere, not just here, you already know the pattern. Every stage that was supposed to be a wall became a solution. Every moment that was supposed to mark the end of the road turned into the next step forward. Every warning that said this level of reconstruction can only happen inside the manufacturer's own ecosystem got tested in real time, in a real workshop, by real hands that weren't wearing a Bugatti uniform. So the question of whether this car can be rebuilt is gone. That question was answered a long time ago. What remains now is something far more interesting. What happens when the company that said no is forced to watch a result that keeps saying yes? Because here's the part that tends to get lost in the excitement of watching the build itself. Bugatti didn't just assume this project would be difficult. They assumed it would stop. That's the distinction that matters. When a car at this level sustains the kind of damage this Chiron sustained, the expectation, inside the manufacturer's world, is that the path forward runs through them. It gets assessed, controlled, guided, and handled within their network. That's not arrogance. That's the architecture of how these cars exist. They are built within a system, and the assumption has always been that serious reconstruction belongs to that same system. But this build didn't follow that architecture. It stepped outside it entirely and kept moving. And that's why this final stage carries a different kind of weight. Because now the Chiron isn't just being put back together. It's reaching a point where it starts to prove something that was never designed to be proven in public. And that's where Bugatti's current position quietly sits in the background. Not loudly, not with any official statement, but present. Because at this stage, it's impossible not to be aware of what's happening. A multi-million-dollar hypercar, rebuilt outside the factory, approaching full completion in front of an audience of hundreds of thousands of people. Even if nothing is said publicly, the awareness is there. And that awareness creates its own kind of tension. Not confrontation, but observation. The kind of watching that happens when something you previously classified as outside the realm of practical possibility starts crossing the finish line somewhere else. Meanwhile, the actual build keeps moving. Quietly, methodically, without pausing for permission or waiting for acknowledgement from anyone. That consistency, that refusal to slow down when things got complicated, is what carried this project to where it is now. Think about what that looked like in practice. Every time a structural challenge came up, it got solved. Every time a part couldn't be sourced through conventional channels, a path was found. Every time the complexity of the car's systems created a new layer of difficulty, the approach stayed the same. Not delay. Not discussion that went in circles. Just solutions, one after another, until the problem was behind them. That approach is what momentum looks like at this scale. And once a project like this builds that kind of momentum, it doesn't lose it easily. Now, most of the visible disorder is behind the build. The early chaos of a car stripped down to its bones, the uncertainty of whether key structural components could be properly restored, the fabrication challenges that had no manual to reference, that part of the story is largely over. What remains is refinement, final alignment, and the confirmation that every system works not just on its own, but as part of one unified machine. And this is exactly where the pressure tightens. Because early stages of a rebuild are forgiving in ways that late stages simply aren't. Early on, you have room to adjust, to revisit, to course correct without consequence. Late stages don't offer that. At this point in the build, everything has to align. Everything has to function together. Every decision made 3 months ago shows up now either as a solid foundation or as something that has to be addressed before the car ever sees a road. With a car like the Chiron, that stakes are amplified beyond what most people fully appreciate. This isn't a vehicle where you can have one system working independently of another. Every section is connected to something else. The structural decisions affect the aerodynamic behavior. The powertrain integration affects the electronics. The fitment of exterior components affects how everything beneath them sits and seals and performs. Nothing is isolated. Nothing is just cosmetic. Every part is part of a larger conversation between systems, and at this stage, that conversation has to be coherent. Which is why shortcuts don't survive this stage. Anything that was done quickly rather than correctly will announce itself now. And that's where observers outside the workshop, both the skeptics and the supporters, start paying a different kind of attention. Because the question has shifted again. People are no longer asking whether the car can be rebuilt. They're asking something sharper. If it works, what does that actually say about how these cars are constructed in the first place? What does it say about the necessity of factory involvement in reconstruction? What does it say about the gap between manufacturer claims and the real-world capabilities of skilled builders working outside that system? That question is where opinions start fracturing. One side sees this as a genuine demonstration of skill and innovation. Another sees it as overstepping boundaries that exist for legitimate reasons. And a third group, probably the largest, is simply watching the whole thing unfold like a live experiment that nobody planned, nobody officially sanctioned, and nobody can look away from. But none of those perspectives change anything inside the workshop. The focus there isn't on perception. It never has been. It's on completion. And completion at this level has a very specific meaning. Not partial. Not symbolic. Not, it looks finished. Fully functional. Every system live. Every performance parameter behaving the way it should. The car not just assembled, but alive in the way only a Chiron is alive when everything is working as one. That's the standard this build has been moving toward. And reaching it, actually reaching it, is where the conversation changes one final time. Because the original position from the manufacturer's side was never just that rebuilding would be hard. It was that it shouldn't happen outside their controlled environment. Those are two different statements. The first is a practical warning. The second is a claim about authority and feasibility. And claims about feasibility, once disproven in public, don't quietly disappear. They become reference points. They get cited. They get brought back up every time someone faces a similar decision about a similarly complex machine. That's the legacy sitting at the end of this build, whether it was ever the intention or not. Because even before the car takes its first drive under its own power, the journey itself is already the statement. This wasn't a simulation. It wasn't a concept or a proposal or a theoretical exercise in what might be possible. It was real-world reconstruction of one of the most mechanically complex road cars ever built, conducted outside the factory that built it, in front of an audience watching every stage in real time. That alone changes something permanently about how people look at these projects. The closer it gets to completion, the more the atmosphere around it shifts. Excitement becomes anticipation. Anticipation becomes expectation. And now people aren't just watching to see if it works, they're watching to see how the story ends. Whether the car fires up and drives. Whether anyone at the top of the automotive world says anything at all. Because at this point, silence from that direction says just as much as a statement would. That's where the real tension lives right now. Not in the workshop. The workshop has its answer. The tension lives in what comes after completion. Because once the final stage is reached and this car is declared done, not in progress, not almost there, but done, this project stops being a rebuild and becomes a case study. Something the industry will reference. Something builders will point to. Something manufacturers will have to quietly account for when they next make claims about what can and cannot happen outside their system. Whether that outcome was the goal from day one, or whether it arrived as a consequence of simply refusing to quit, doesn't really matter at this point. That's where this is heading regardless. So the question now isn't what has been done. That's visible to anyone paying attention. The question is what this final stage means, for the builder who carried it here, for the audience that watched every step, and for the company that originally drew a line and watched this project cross it anyway. The Chiron is no longer just a rebuild. It's a benchmark. And we're almost at the moment it stops being work in progress and becomes history.